Artemis II will experience something that no human has experienced ever. For more than 53 years, no human being left low Earth orbit. Not once. The longest gap in exploration since we figured out how to explore. And it ended 4 days ago when a rocket carrying 4 astronauts punched through the Florida sky and aimed itself at the moon. Artemis II is not a repeat of Apollo. It is not a sequel. The crew flying right now, Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, are doing things inside that spacecraft that Apollo astronauts couldn't have imagined. Some of what they're experiencing would have seemed to the engineers of 1972 like science fiction. So what changed in half a century? Almost everything. Start with the spacecraft itself. The Apollo command module gave its 3-person crew about 210 cubic feet of habitable space. That is roughly the interior volume of a large closet. 3 grown men sealed inside a closet for up to 14 days. Orion gives its 4-person crew 330 cubic feet, nearly 60% more room. That is about the space of 2 minivans parked side by side with the seats removed. Still tight, still claustrophobic, but the difference between a closet and 2 minivans matters when you're 250,000 miles from the nearest hospital. The extra space changes what the crew can do. Orion has a dedicated hygiene bay with actual doors that close. There is a toilet that collects urine and feces separately and processes them with something Apollo never had: privacy. Apollo crews used plastic bags taped to their bodies, used in front of each other, and then sealed and stored inside the cabin. Nearly every Apollo astronaut describes it as one of the worst parts of spaceflight. The Artemis II crew will never know that particular indignity. Then there's exercise. Apollo astronauts didn't exercise in space. There was no room, no equipment. NASA decided the muscle and bone loss was acceptable. The Artemis II crew exercises every day except launch and landing days, 30 minutes each, on a device called a flywheel. It weighs about 30 pounds and fits in the space of a carry-on suitcase. You can row on it, you can do squats and deadlifts. Apollo had nothing. The crews came home weak. Some could barely stand. The Artemis II crew will come home having done deadlifts in 0 gravity on their way to the moon. The rocket is different too. Apollo rode the Saturn V, generating 7.5 million pounds of thrust. The Space Launch System that carried Artemis II produces 8.8 million, 17% more. Both rockets are expendable, but Cells was built to throw Orion toward the moon in a single launch. No orbital assembly, no refueling. The difference is what sits on top. Apollo was powered entirely by fuel cells and batteries. Every watt came from a tank that was getting emptier. Orion unfurls 4 solar array wings after reaching space. The power supply is for all practical purposes unlimited as long as the sun is shining. And the service module wasn't even built in the United States. It was built by Airbus in Europe, provided by the European Space Agency. Apollo was an American project from the rivets up. Artemis is international by design. A Canadian astronaut is on this flight. European hardware is keeping the crew alive. Now look at what's behind the panels. Orion's flight computers are roughly 20,000 times faster than Apollo's. Apollo's guidance computer had about 72 kilobytes of memory. Orion runs 4 independent computers in parallel, each one 400 times faster than the space shuttles. The cockpit is entirely digital: glass screens, software interfaces, real-time trajectory adjustments. Apollo's cockpit was analog switches, dials, physical gauges. Orion can fly itself. It demonstrated that on Artemis I when the uncrewed spacecraft completed a full lunar mission autonomously. The Artemis II crew has been performing manual piloting demonstrations in deep space, physically flying the spacecraft and testing how it responds. Apollo astronauts flew manually during specific phases, but they never flew the command module through open space the way this crew just did. Speaking of communication, Apollo talked to Houston using radio waves. The audio was scratchy, the bandwidth narrow. Transmitting a single photograph could take minutes. Orion has laser communications, using infrared light to transmit data back to Earth at rates that would have been unthinkable during Apollo. By the fourth day of the mission, the system had already downlinked over 100 gigabytes, including high-resolution photographs the crew was taking through Orion's windows. Apollo's total data return from an entire mission measured in megabytes. The views themselves are different too. Every Apollo mission flew approximately 70 miles above the lunar surface. Artemis II won't get that close. At closest approach, Orion will be about 4,600 miles from the lunar surface. Instead of skimming over the surface, the crew will see the entire disk of the moon at once. No Apollo astronaut ever had that view. And because of the geometry of this trajectory, the crew will see something no human has ever seen with their own eyes: the Orientale basin, a massive impact crater on the transition zone between the near side and far side. No person has ever looked at it directly. For the first time, a human being looked at a feature of the moon and saw something that only machines had seen before. There's a solar eclipse coming too, not the kind you see from Earth. This one happens when the Earth blocks the sun as seen from behind the moon. It will last about 53 minutes. No Apollo crew experienced anything like it. Reid Wiseman described the views so far as something no amount of training could have prepared him for. He said you could see the entire globe from pole to pole, Africa, Europe, and if you looked closely, the Northern Lights. The mission will also break the record for the farthest distance any human has traveled from Earth. That record currently belongs to Apollo 13, not by choice. Their free return trajectory after the oxygen tank explosion carried them 248,655 miles from home. Artemis II is expected to reach approximately 252,757 miles. Apollo 13 set that record because something went catastrophically wrong. Artemis II will break it because the mission was designed that way from the start. What was once a last resort is now the architecture. At the end of all of it, the crew will face something no human has ever survived at this speed: reentry. When Orion hits Earth's atmosphere, it will be traveling at approximately 25,000 miles per hour. Faster than any crewed spacecraft has ever traveled during reentry. Faster than Apollo, faster than the shuttle, faster than anything. The heat shield will endure temperatures approaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit as superheated plasma wraps around the vehicle and blocks all communication. The crew will be completely alone for those minutes, unable to talk to Houston, unable to do anything except trust the engineering. That heat shield is carrying its own story. After Artemis I returned, engineers found unexpected erosion in the ablative material. The underlying structure held, but the damage raised questions serious enough that NASA spent years analyzing whether the shield was safe for a crewed flight. Some engineers objected. Some wanted a redesign. NASA gave the go-ahead. The shield flying on Artemis II is essentially the same design. The crew knows this. They accepted the risk. The crew itself represents something Apollo never did. Victor Glover is the first person of color to travel beyond low Earth orbit. Christina Koch is the first woman. Jeremy Hansen is the first non-American citizen. Apollo was exclusively American, exclusively white, and exclusively male. Artemis II doesn't fix that history, but it means the first humans to see the moon up close in over 50 years look more like the species they represent. There's also a quieter experiment happening. The crew is being monitored for the biological effects of deep space radiation in ways that go far beyond what Apollo tracked. Radiation dosimeters, sleep pattern analysis, cardiovascular data. The Artemis II crew punched through both Van Allen belts on the way out and will punch through them again on the way home. Apollo astronauts did the same, but the medical monitoring was primitive. The data from this mission will shape every deep space crew selection for decades. 4 people are in deep space right now. That is the most humans in deep space simultaneously in the history of our species. Apollo never sent more than 3 beyond low Earth orbit. Artemis II has 4. They're eating rehydrated meals from a food warmer the size of a briefcase, sleeping in bags attached to the walls, exercising on a 30-pound yo-yo. They've already seen parts of the moon that no one alive has ever seen. And by tomorrow, they will have traveled farther from Earth than any human being who came before them. The Artemis II crew will splash down in the Pacific Ocean. Recovery ships will be waiting. Divers will open the hatch and help 4 people climb out into the sunlight. Those 4 people will have completed the first crewed mission beyond Earth orbit in more than half a century. They will have tested every system that future crews will depend on to actually land on the moon. When Apollo astronauts came home, they came home as conquerors. The moon had been the target, and they hit it. When the Artemis II crew comes home, they'll come home as pathfinders. The moon isn't the destination anymore. It's the first stop. Everything this crew is testing is being validated not just for lunar missions, but for the journey that comes after Mars. Apollo proved we could leave. Artemis is figuring out how to stay gone. Right now, 4 human beings are closer to the moon than anyone has been since December 1972. They're looking out windows bigger and clearer than anything Apollo offered. They're transmitting images home at speeds that make Apollo's radio look like smoke signals. They're flying a spacecraft that can think for itself. They are not repeating what Apollo did. They're picking up a thread that was dropped in 1972, pulling it forward and weaving something new. And soon, they will fly behind the moon. No signal will reach them. No voice from Earth, no data link, no connection to anything human except the 3 other people floating beside them. The moon still blocks the signal. The void is still the void. That silence is the same. Everything else is new. Thank you for watching. Like, share, comment and subscribe now for more interesting video.